Hi. Let's start with a hypothetical. So let's say that we have a trans girl. Let's say that she's, I don't know, let's say that she's in like high school. Let's say that this trans girl has known that she's trans for a couple years now, but has only recently come out. Let's say that she came out to her family and her family was largely accepting. They're like, all right, we're going to refer to you with she, her pronouns. We'll help you get HRT. We'll support you with all that. Let's say that she lives in an area where she's decently, I don't know, let's say that she lives in like a fairly liberal area. She talks to her school. They change her records so she's using she, her pronouns. And, like she is presenting femme in all aspects of her life, right? But she still is relatively early in HRT and is in sort of, the awkward early transition phase. So let's say that's a person that we're working with. And let's say that one day while she's driving home from high school, as many high schoolers do, she looks at her phone and takes her eyes off the road. She was acting negligently. She knew she probably shouldn't, but she was like, oh, whatever. It'll just be for a second. That one boy who was really cute in my class just texted me and I really want to respond. And she looks away from the road and she accidentally swerves and hits a pole, wrecking the car. Now, she is fine. The girl is fine, right? Completely unharmed. She knows, as things are unfolding that she did something wrong, right? Like, she knows that, oh, crap, I shouldn't have taken my eyes off the road. Oh, crap, like, my mom is going to be so pissed at me. And she goes home and explains this to her mom. And her mom is indeed pissed. Her mom says, oh my God, like, our insurance will cover it, but now our premiums are going to go through the roof. This is going to cost me so much money. I'm so mad at you. Like, why did you do this? And let's say, as a punishment, the mother decides to stop referring to her with she, her pronouns. Let's say, or at least for a period until which the daughter has earned them back. Question: is what the mother did morally wrong? So a little earlier, I was watching YouTube as I was eating dinner, as I do. And again, like, listen, I've said before on this channel that I don't love, doing these reaction videos. But hey, I've looked at the statistics and y'all freaking love them, right? Y'all love them. And so apparently if that's what you want me to do, then all right, I'll take my stab at this thing, or at least we'll see what happens. We'll see where things go. And so I was watching YouTube, and I saw some commentary on a video that was recently put up within the past week by Blaire White. I'm a predator, but it's okay because I'm trans. Okay, ... So I'm not going to go through this video. It's here if you want to watch it. I'm going to summarize the points that are important for what we're going to be talking about. Blaire talks a lot about a story that's been written a lot, especially like in a lot of conservative media, right? I tried looking up this article after I watched this video, and you can only really find it on like far-right websites being reported. But I found one someone pointed out that there's one website which talks about it. Metro, apparently they're not as terrible. I don't know much about them otherwise. But the point of the story is basically this, or here are the essential facts. You have someone who committed a heinous crime. You have someone who committed a heinous crime of going and molesting, according to the facts. Let's look at the article real quick just to make sure. Said that she had abused up to 15 youngsters aged between 1 and 13. Very serious crime, right? Morally reprehensible. She is in the wrong, right? No doubt about it. But what ended up happening was, according to, again, this story, I'll link it down in the description, is that this person was eventually released on bail, treatment for 2 years. So essentially, I'm going to recount the facts and then I'll fill them in if I need to. Essentially, this person was serving time and eventually came out as trans, or maybe came out as trans before, but started hormone replacement therapy as she's a trans woman while in church. Or, while in prison. Churches are prisons. But, started hormone replacement therapy while she was in prison, right? It's unfortunate that this picture is used. From what I understand, it's actually the picture that she was taken of when she went into the prison. So it's very likely this isn't what she looks like nowadays. But what do you do? And so effectively what happened was, yeah, after she went on hormone replacement therapy for long enough, the Attorney General spokesman Lynn Hicks said that we don't believe we have enough evidence sufficient to prove Josie Smith had a significant chance of reoffending. And so they released her and said that she'll be subject to supervision for the rest of her life, right? So it's not like she's getting off on the hook, right? But the people who had her in jail determined that, well, she wasn't enough of a threat to warrant keeping her there, given the nature of where she was at with hormone replacement therapy, so they let her go. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, a lot of layers to this, but this isn't actually the focal point of what I want to talk about, because what's perhaps more important to me, right, and maybe I'll touch on this a little bit more, but what's more important to me is the reaction. Because during this video, Blaire repeatedly refers to this person with he, him pronouns. Repeatedly refers to this person as a man, even though categorically this person has taken hormone replacement therapy. And even if we're using a standard, like Blaire White is a trans medicalist, right? She believes that you need to have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and you need to go through some form of medical transition in order to be considered like a true trans woman, right? There are lots of problems with that, but like even following that logic, then you should still say, I guess I'm saying you referring to Blaire, then Blaire should still say that this person is a trans woman because they have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and they have been through medical transition. And so it doesn't really seem like Blaire, like what we have here is an instance where you have Blaire blatantly going against her own standard, right? Like she's a trans medicalist and if she is a trans medicalist, then this person is as much a woman as she is. Actually, I think that this comparison is really interesting because I think that what this is getting at, like Blaire always talks about, oh, medical transition, oh, this, that, and the other, right? Like trying to support her beliefs and who is and is not a valid trans person in a neutral form of appeal to scientific authority. But really, at the end of the day, when that logic does not serve her purpose, she just doesn't care. Throughout this entire video, she doesn't offer a reason that this person is not a valid trans person and that she does not refer to her with she, her pronouns, right? Like she doesn't give a reason for it. She just expresses how disgusted she is that she has to refer to her with she, her pronouns. At the beginning of the video, I talked about a hypothetical. And really the point of the hypothetical is to push home this point. It was a much softer version of it, but it's to push home this point. If you have someone who is trans and they do something which is morally reprehensible or something which is wrong by some subjective standard, which is at least like halfway morally upright in society, then is it just to take away is it just to not refer to them with their preferred pronouns? This is a question that I dealt with a lot because, I mean, especially when I was early in transition, I was always scared of that. I was always walking around on eggshells trying to be like the most morally upright person possible because I was always afraid that if I pissed someone off, then they would basically just try to hurt me by using he, him pronouns on me. Like, that's what the fear was. And that's a horrible fear. It's a horrible thing to be afraid of. Because at the end of the day, Blaire, if you're watching this, welcome to my channel. Oh my god, it's great to have you here. But at the end of the day, Blaire, it doesn't really matter what they did insofar as their identity is concerned. You're reacting to this because, sure, it has a lot of shock value as a story to it, right? Like, there's a lot to unpack there, and they did a lot of horrible things, and I'm not defending a single one of them. But at the end of the day, this is sort of a human rights issue. Even if you have the worst person in the world, and you might define this person very well as one of the worst people in the world, do they still deserve that basic human dignity of being referred to by who they are? Recently in criminal law, I actually just took criminal law. I'm in law school. For people who don't know, I am a current law student. Wonderful. My life is living hell, but I'm getting by. And I just finished criminal law this past semester. There are two different ways that we think about punishment in the criminal law. We think about schools of thought or philosophies under realms of one, retributivism. That is punishing someone to the extent that society believes that they deserve it, right? Blaire talks a lot in this video about the fact that she believes that this person needs to be punished so much more because of the horrible crime they did, right? And to some extent, I feel like that's why she feels sort of vindicated in referring to this person with he, him pronouns, because she's like, oh yeah, well, it's hard for me to paraphrase because, like, I want to refer to this person with she, her pronouns, but Blaire didn't. So I'm just going to tell you that, like, Blaire was constantly complaining that, like, this is such a horrible person, you know, I should not have to refer to them or even share, you know, she, her pronouns with them, right? Because of how horrible they are. And in that way, she's thinking in a very retributivist sort of style, right? And she makes a lot of statements that, like, this is what, like, they should have been thrown away forever. Like, you know, they shouldn't be, like, she makes a lot of these statements throughout the video and talks about how that is how this person should have been treated. But the fact of the matter is, that's only half of the consideration for when people in the criminal law, especially the criminal law process, determine how to treat people who are convicted of crimes, right? And the other half, the other school of thought, is utilitarianism, which at its most basic tries to minimize harm to the most people in society, including people who are convicted of crimes. They believe that you punish people to the extent that it would help rehabilitate them and to the point where they would no longer be a threat to society. And really, if they're no threat to society, then there's really no purpose in punishing them more, right? Why increase harm? Why inflict more undue harm on them? Again, like, I see the counter, like, both of these are two sides of the same coin. Like, they're very, you know, differing in application. And so what you see in most society is a manifestation of sort of a blending of the two in something called the utility of desert, which is this idea where we try to be as utilitarian as possible in how we implement sentencing and, you know, criminal placement in prisons and all that, up to the outer bounds of what society expects as far as punishment for certain crimes as being reflective of our morals, right? It's a middle ground that we try to strike, and it's always shifting, and this is a constant debate that happens within the criminal law community. the reason I bring this up is because we could think of this very similar in a way to prisoners' rights, which are always going to be unpopular to the larger public, especially people who are conservative. So this isn't surprising in the lightest, right? Like, you know, you could definitely, like, it's easy enough to see that Blaire would take this sort of a position because we know as an audience that she is extremely conservative, right? And so of course she's going to be anti prisoners' rights and anti how we and she's going to be very hostile to how we treat prisoners. And given her record with like trans people, and especially trans people that she doesn't seem as valid, like this is just sort of a logical progression of that. But we also, as a country, have adopted a lot of principles, whether or not people like to acknowledge them, which are specifically geared at protecting prisoners' rights. Because something that is very easy to forget is that even if you have someone who has done something horrible and morally reprehensible, they are people. And they are people who are entitled to the same basic human dignity that every other person is afforded in society. The Constitution says that, for example, we cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness except under due process of law, and that we are free from, oh my God, what's the term? I'm blanking on this. I'm in the middle of con law right now, so don't judge me too hard. But unusual punishment, cruel and unusual punishment. There you go. And I think that we're at an interesting point in society where we are, you know, figuring out what are the basic things, what are basic, you know, human rights and decencies that are afforded to trans people. And I can speak from personal experience, right? And this is just me, but I assume that other people would adopt this as well, that it is horrible to think that my identity literally hangs in the balance of whether or not I do good or bad things, right? You know, whether or not I am a quote-unquote good person is, like, it's terrible to think that that is a determinant factor in determining whether or not I have earned womanhood. Womanhood and gender is not something that you earn, it's who you are, right? To say that this person does not deserve to be referred to she or her pronouns because of how terrible of a person she is kind of an awful argument, because if you follow it to its logical progression, then if you go back to the hypothetical way at the beginning of this show, of this recording, then it means that, you know, that trans girl who made an honest mistake, but, you know, did something which it's arguable that deserves punishment of some kind, it means that it's justifiable for her mom to not refer to her with she, her pronouns. That's sort of the logical conclusion of it. This is really relevant, especially going forward in society. There's a lot of cases right now about trans women in prisons who have been drastically mistreated by them. In Maryland, there's a woman in a prison, in a male prison, a trans woman in a male prison who is subject to solitary confinement and who is treated horribly by the prison, right? Who is treated horribly by them, who is not being given the proper hormonal doses because the prison is quote-unquote afraid that she'll inflict self-harm on herself, even though that's ridiculous. And, you know, obviously the most harmful thing they could do is take away her, you know, very necessary medical treatment, right? Trans rights in prisons are a very heavily litigated and a very, very controversial issue in society right now. And I think it's good to be able to have this conversation as a community, because whether or not you, I mean, like, again, like, I'm definitely, like, 100% not defending this person's actions. It sounds like what they did was absolutely morally reprehensible, right? Bottom line. But I'm still going to refer to them with she, her pronouns. That's what they deserve. They are categorically as much a trans woman as I or anyone else, and as much as Blaire, even by her own metric of transmedicalism. And really, this just kind of shows her hypocrisy. At the end of the day, if you want the hot Blaire White take from this video, It's that really she only uses the metrics that she talks about, that she tries to platform in her own videos and her channel, to the extent that they are helpful to her and her arguments. And the moment that they aren't, she just kind of throws them out the window. Because at the end of the day, she already knows what her conclusion is. She already knows what she thinks of people. She's just looking for ways to justify those beliefs. And in that sense, she is the definition of a bad faith actress. Whatever. It's a gender neutral term. I feel bad that I had her taking up the majority of the recording there, but it's a good point for discussion for this conversation. I'm going to go. I have a paper to write, and I was not planning on doing this originally, but hey, procrastination is alive and well in the world. Wonderful. I hope you enjoyed this conversation useful. And yeah, if you want to see more content like this in the future, let me know. Bye, fam.